have you ever stopped to think about why we work the way we do? I mean, really think about it. The whole structure of our jobs, from the factory floor to the latest Zoom call, was designed by someone. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the powerful and kind of surprising history of how we work.
Okay, so let's get right into it with a question for you. Why do you report to one specific manager? Or why are your daily tasks broken down in that particular way? Heck, why does your company even bother with things like team building events? It might seem random, but trust me, there are very specific historical reasons for all of it.
And believe it or not, the answers start over a century ago with a really fundamental problem. How on earth do you get huge groups of people to work together without it all falling into chaos? Well, that challenge has a name: organization.
At its heart, an organization is really just that, a bunch of people with a shared goal. Simple, right? But getting everyone rowing in the same direction, well, that's the real trick. And that requires something else, something called administration. You can almost think of administration as being the conductor of an orchestra. You've got all these different instruments, people, money, new technologies. The job is to bring them all together to create one single unified performance. And this became a massive, urgent problem during a time of absolutely incredible change.
So the Industrial Revolutions didn't just give us cool stuff like steam engines and assembly lines. They created factories and companies on a scale nobody had ever seen before. And all that sudden growth, it brought pure chaos. And that chaos was crying out for a new way of thinking, a way to bring some order to the madness.
And the very first answer to all this industrial chaos was to look at these brand new organizations and see them as giant machines. Seriously. And if your company is a machine, what's the only goal? To make that machine run as smoothly and efficiently as humanly possible.
Now, the key figure here was a guy named Frederick Taylor. He thought the old rule of thumb, "this is how we've always done it" approach was just sloppy. Instead, he argued that there was one best way to do any task. His method, which he called scientific management, was about studying work like a science. Break it down into the tiniest, most precise steps, find the perfect person for that job, and then train them to do it perfectly, over and over and over again.
Now, this scientific approach was an absolute game changer for productivity. No question about it. But it was built on a very simple and maybe a little cold idea of what makes people tick. The assumption was that workers are just rational parts of the machine, motivated by one thing and one thing only: making more money. Meanwhile, all the way across the Atlantic, another pioneer named Henri Fayol was tackling the exact same problem, but he was looking at it from the top down. While Taylor was obsessed with the individual tasks, Fayol was focused on the managers. And he came up with 14 universal principles for running the entire organization.
What's just incredible is how familiar these principles still feel. Having a single boss, a clear chain of command, specialized roles, this is the basic DNA of pretty much every modern company. You could say Fayol basically invented the org chart.
But there was a pretty big problem with the machine model. See, the cogs, the human parts, started to feel, well, human. It turned out they weren't just motivated by a paycheck. And this realization led to a completely accidental, world-changing discovery.
So get this. In the 1920s and 30s, researchers were at the Hawthorne Works factories studying how things like the level of lighting affected worker productivity. But they stumbled onto something way more profound. It turned out, productivity went up no matter what they did with the lights because the workers were just happy to be getting some attention. The biggest discovery was that the most valuable part of the organization wasn't the process at all, it was the people.
And this finding gave birth to a whole new way of thinking, the human relations movement. It was a complete 180. We moved from Taylor's economic man, who was basically a coin-operated machine part, to the social man, who is motivated by relationships, a sense of belonging, and the dynamics of the group.
The psychologist Abraham Maslow perfectly captured this new mindset. His famous hierarchy of needs showed that human motivation is, complicated. Sure, a paycheck takes care of the basic needs at the bottom of the pyramid. But if you want to get people truly engaged, you have to appeal to their higher needs for belonging, for a feeling of accomplishment, and even for reaching their full potential.
So, first we focused on the tasks, then we zeroed in on the people. But both of those views were still a little too narrow. The next great leap in how we think about work was realizing that organizations aren't just machines or families. They're complex, living systems.
Systems theory basically forced managers to zoom out. They had to start seeing how every single department, marketing,
finance, sales, production, wasn't just its own little island. No, they were all interconnected organs in a larger body. A change in one part would ripple through all the others, and the entire organization had to constantly adapt to the world outside to survive.
Which, of course, brings us to the ultimate question, the one that Taylor, Fayol, and all these brilliant minds were trying to answer. After all these different theories, which one is right? What's the secret? And the answer, which comes from something called contingency theory, is both incredibly simple and profoundly wise. There is no single best way to manage. The answer is, it depends. The best management style is contingent. It all depends on the situation. That rigid, top-down structure that works perfectly for a giant car manufacturer, it would absolutely crush the creativity of a small software startup. The right way to manage is simply the one that fits the unique circumstances of the company, its people, and the world it operates in.
So, how does all this history actually show up in our lives today? And, more importantly, what does it tell us about the future of work?
The amazing thing is you can see the ghosts of all these theories in your job right now. That super detailed job description you have, that's straight out of Taylor's playbook. Your spot in the org chart and who you report to, that's pure Fayol. The company picnic or holiday party to boost morale, yep, that's a direct descendant of the human relations movement. And any good manager who knows how to adapt their style to different people and different situations, they're living and breathing contingency theory. And this really shows you the core tension in the history of management. It's this constant push and pull between treating people like cogs for efficiency versus empowering them as humans for creativity. Modern thinkers like Peter Drucker tried to bridge that gap with ideas like management by objectives, which is all about setting clear goals, but then giving people the freedom to figure out how to reach them. It's about trying to get the best of both worlds.
So in the end, the way we work isn't some set of rules carved in stone. It's an ever-evolving story, a constant reaction to the challenges of the time. And now, as we're standing right on the edge of a new revolution driven by AI and automation, it leaves us with a huge question. What is the next great management theory going to be, and how is it going to change the way all of us work tomorrow?